folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about various polls that supposedly have taken place across the Western polities, the Western nations. And I'm thinking primarily of Britain. I think there was one in France and Holland or Belgium, and another one in may have been Norway, Sweden. But these polls, interestingly, all talk about how these third world migrants are forced in and facilitated and so on by the globalist machine, how they love the idea of going from a dirt poor country to a rich country, and who wouldn't, really? So they've gone from their little shitbox hut with a dirt floor and no running water, where they've got to walk a mile to the nearest, or more or further, to the nearest well. There's no flushing toilet, where they live on relatively meager rations and so on and so forth. There's no lights. They can't just switch on a light and have a look. So they come to a country where they can just flick a light switch and there it is. They've got water out of the tap faucet. They've got food at the local corner store. They've got 24/7 internet and telephone access, and wow. They've got paved roads. They've got public transport. They can go and see a doctor that's not far away. They can travel sort of from one end of the country to the other in a matter of hours with using the trains or whatever, and so on and so forth. There's a huge sort of underground illicit market for cheap peasant labor, so they can get work if they want. So look, why wouldn't you want to come to a place like that? But these same people have two other interesting aspects to this. One is they say that they are the victims of racism every day. Now, these racist things aren't explained. Is it absolute right? Like they're being treated badly just because of their skin color and nothing else? Now, I've sort of spoken to a number of people that have come to, even white people for that matter. There's some people came from rural, I don't know, where was it? I think the Czech Republic. They lived in some little village out in the middle of nowhere, the Czech Republic, and they barely spoke a word of English, and they had they were just agricultural workers in effect, and they were complaining about racism. They spoke some German, and I did, so we kind of got through on that. But they believed they were victims of racism. But their interpretation of racism was because they couldn't speak the language, they were being dismissed or ignored, or they couldn't access the goods and services they wanted. So the racism, as their perception of racism was, I don't speak your language, and therefore I'm finding it difficult. And that means you're racist to me. You should give me a full-time interpreter to walk around with me all the time so I can get whatever I want. I mean, that's paraphrasing there, but that was the attitude. So, and that was a white person. So the idea of racism is, you're a literate third world peasant, and sure, you love all the goodies and all the things that you've never seen before, and you only see in Western movies. Sure, you love all that sort of stuff, but when you can't have everything you want, and people are ignoring you or dismissing you or being impatient with you or being irritated with you, then because you don't speak the language, and because you've got a particularly ravenous appetite for handouts, then that's not racism. So their interpretation of what is racism is certainly very broad and not based on their skin color at all, but based on their inability to. There's no mosque within walking distance of my house. That's racist, and so on. So their litany of racist claims has nothing to do with racism. It just give me what I want, and if you don't give me what I want, then you're being racist to me. So it's a very narrow thing. I'm surprised that well, not surprised, no, that the media didn't try and expose that. Instead, the media, because this is part of their narrative, see, that's proof of evil, fascist, fucking Nazi white people are oppressing these poor helpless third world peasants. But it's nothing of the sort. There's a few other things that were interesting, and I'm adding some of my own sort of experience here. The Indians, this is the subcontinent Indians, are gagging and salivating over the thought that in the future, as they perceive it, they will be the majority in Australia. So they'll be the outright majority, and whites and any other group will be in minority status. And this seems to really excite them, and they wow, it's just they can't wait for the day, and some of it's sort of their insecurity that white people sort of supplanted the Brahmins, if you like, as the demigods of the Indian, the Hindu type population. There, the Brahmins have never forgiven the British for that, nor will they ever, I think. And revenge is very much on their minds. There, part of that revenge is to have an Indian as the Prime Minister of Great Britain, not even voted for by the people or the parliamentarians for that matter, and to have a majority of Indians in Australia and Canada and elsewhere. So that's sort of one of their, if you like, their broader civilizational objectives. But it's you talk to these Indians, say, well, do you want black people from Africa? Oh no, I don't want them. What about Chinese people? No, I don't want them. What about Pakistanis and the Islamic people? No, we don't want them. So in fact, the Indians are very racist. And you look at the various groups. The Pakistanis don't want more Indians. The black people don't want more Chinese, and the Chinese don't want more black people, and so on. So the only folks that aren't racist, or at the least racist, are the white people. Now you wouldn't know it because the globalist narrative is to say that all white people are Nazis and that sort of thing. But they have to say that because they're forcing masses of black and brown people through immigration and mass people movement. They're forcing masses of brown and black people into the West. White people are suffering and losing their standards of living and their quality of life because of it. So to shut the white people up, they just accuse them all of being Nazis. It's like a blanket thing. The people that suffer the most will be the least on board with it. So we'll just call them all Nazis. But this comes back to looking at all these other groups don't want migration. The Indians don't want migration from any other group. They're happy that more Indians come, but only the sort of Indians that they approve of. Even that's sort of classist, as in the tiers of class in the Indian society. So even that's sort of something that the Indians want to take better control of and decide who comes to Australia and who doesn't, even from their own nation. So looking at that, it's hard to find any example of racism at all. And the interpretation of racism isn't anything to do with skin color. It's to do with I don't want to integrate. I shouldn't have to integrate, but I should have all the benefits of living here. And that's with that attitude you can accuse anyone and anything of being racist. I should add that I've done as I've mentioned many times. I've done a vast amount of business travel all around the world, many times over, and my take is that white people are the least racist of all the races. The racism in these other places is hysterical and constantly, irregularly flares up into conflict and running street battles and things like that. So whereas white people have very stable, orderly, in comparison, have stable, orderly societies, and if it wasn't for the black issue in the United States, that would be a very, very stable society, or hitherto before the mass migration. So looking at racism, just purely acting on skin color, then white people are the least racist, and all the other, whether it be Africans, Indians, or wherever they are far more, just on skin color alone. Now, there's a second tier of this, I guess, which is not skin color per se, but the cultural roots a particular group has. There are certain ways that Indians behave, or that Thai people behave, or that Chinese do, or that there's certain sort of behavioural characteristics that, on balance of probability, they'll be there. Now, I found whenever I went to France, I don't speak particularly good French. I speak some, but it's not very good. I don't pretend it is. But I found every time I went to France on business, that a lot of the people there were very impatient and irritated with me. The people at the Apex usually spoke enough English, so with my piss poor French, we could kind of get by. But the people like the taxi drivers, the people working at the airports, where you'd think they would be a little more tolerant, they were incredibly impatient, and I found that I was regularly having a problem. I remember I was needing to go to a hotel, and I couldn't remember how to say the number in French. So this is pre those little telephone interpreter apps and so on. But I could say the number 25, but I couldn't remember how to say 25. And the taxi driver just pretended like, don't know what you're talking about. And so I used some profane language, and he knew that. So he knew what I meant. But I found that constantly in France, that if you couldn't speak French, then they would ignore you, saying, no, if you can't say it properly in French, fuck you. And so and again, it wasn't everybody, but it's something I encountered a lot. Now I was, I'm not black or anything. They were white, I was white. So that you see those sort of intolerances, if you want to call it that, or that irritability and impatience, you see that at a cultural level. You come to my country, you speak French, I don't care where you come from. So you can still see that, but again, that's not a race thing. And I think any difficulties or issues or barriers that these people have, that their ravenous appetite for handouts, they will interpret that as racism. But if the media or the pollsters did their proper job, they would expose that as just greedy, grasping, avaricious, low IQ, third world people wanting, with a gimme attitude, and then they should explain it and write it up as that, rather than pretending that the West is all a bunch of racist Nazis, which it's not. Been Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.